it does mean that the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has not been honest. Again, she just confused the client files with the victim files, because after that, her position was, well, people have been working round the clock redacting information. Here's why that seems dishonest. So we are dealing with one of the dumbest scandals ever right now with the Trump administration and the Epstein files. Now, those of you who listen to the show regularly know I've been talking about this for months, right? Months. Why? I've been saying that I think that the reason that they're not going to release the Epstein files, or the reason that they hadn't been releasing them, was because Donald Trump is mentioned in the context of Jeffrey Epstein. And that's embarrassing for Donald Trump. Does that mean Donald Trump committed crimes? No. Does it mean he even did anything wrong? No. But that's the very problem with this quote unquote scandal, is there's no evidence that any of the other people did anything quote wrong apart from hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, it's not, of course, just Donald Trump. It seems that these far-right folks think that they're going to uncover some kind of ring here, that this is just the tip of the iceberg in all this. But we actually know a ton about the quote-unquote Epstein files. How? Because Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who was helping him procure these women, was tried. She was also sued. So there's been tons of information that has come out about Jeffrey Epstein. And that black book, the black book, though, was a book of his victims. It's not a black book of people he was blackmailing. I know it's not as interesting, but it does mean that the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has not been honest, because she claimed she had all of this on her desk. Now, you can say you had a black book. You can say you had a lot of information. You can say you had a lot of legal papers. But that's not what these conspiracy theorists have been looking for. They want to be able to show that there was some sort of pedophilia ring and that others were involved. That's the part that I think they're going to continue to be disappointed in, because when you have people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino saying, okay, Epstein did kill himself, because remember, that's part of the theory is, oh, they killed him so he wouldn't release the names. But now even two of the grand conspiracy theorists in Patel and Bongino are saying he died by suicide. Now, Bongino is very upset about the way this has all been handled, and I understand that. He has every right to be upset. Hasn't been handled well. Why? Well, it started with Pam Bondi's comments, right? That this was a big issue, and she was asked about it on Fox News, and it starts with this comment. This is number 15.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed, because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So again, she just confused the client files with the victim files, because after that, her position was, well, people have been working round the clock redacting information. Here's why that seems dishonest. Because they had to redact all this information previously for the civil trial of Ghislaine Maxwell and the criminal trial of Ghislaine Maxwell to protect the victims, any other victims. They already redacted that stuff. So the idea that, oh, we've been redacting, it never made any sense. Does she deserve some of the blame for this? Sure. For saying the things that she said. And that wasn't all she said. Actually, the bigger interview was the one she did with Jesse Waters, where he asked about the flight logs, for example. Are we going to see all of that? The problem with the flight logs is, as we learned from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, Trump flew on Epstein's plane 7 times. So if you're going to release the flight logs, you're going to release information about Donald Trump. So it's not surprising to me that Trump is trying to make this thing go away. I mean, A, because it's not helpful to him, and I mean that politically, and B, because he is part of this, and I say part of this coming from someone who doesn't believe that there's a list of people involved in criminal activity. He's just someone who rode on Epstein's plane. He had connections to Epstein, as did Bill Clinton. And so here is the president getting annoyed. And by the way, he's written a Truth Social post, which also basically makes the same point, which is sort of saying, why are we still talking about this guy?
Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for an American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the staff?
Yeah, sure. If I
Pam, could I just interrupt for
Sure.
1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
A desecration. Look, he's right that it doesn't matter, right? It's not significant. But the real scandal with this attorney general's office is the fact that, for example, this weekend we learned that 20 people who worked at the DOJ have been fired because they had something to do with the Jack Smith case. Why is that such a scandal? Because the vast majority of these people weren't even prosecutors. They didn't even have the authority to make decisions. They were support staff at the DOJ who touched the Jack Smith case. That's a scandal. The DOJ investigating Trump's enemies, like Chris Krebs, the head of cybersecurity in 2020, who had the gall to say that this was a free and fair election. He's being investigated. James Comey's being investigated. John Brennan's being investigated. That's a scandal. This Epstein thing doesn't matter. It's true. But according to, those, and there was a big conference this weekend, Turning Point USA Summit, a right-wing conference where, listen to Megyn Kelly, who is there talking about what she views as the biggest scandal of the administration, number 6, with Charlie Kirk.
Well, this is the first big scandal, I'd say, of the Trump administration that's on Team Rational. It's not a fake media scandal like the left tries to create for President Trump every other day. It's one of the right's own making, and it's not going well. And it has to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. Let me just ask you, make some noise if you care about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
Raise your hand if it matters a lot to you. Raise your hand. So every hand of 7,000 people.
Everybody cares.
Everyone at that conference cares. But this is cuckoo stuff. I mean, when I say it's cuckoo stuff, I don't mean it's cuckoo to want answers on Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, it's cuckoo to think this is the scandal of the administration. This is the big one. There is no evidence that any of this stuff exists. I mean, Tucker Carlson sitting there talking about, oh, we got to learn about his ties to the Israeli government. It's like they're two scandals, right? Number one, and they're connected. Number one is, did he actually kill himself? And that's connected to, well, this black book of his. But again, the black book were the victims. That's the black book. But here's what I want to do, because I think it's important to lay out how much we already know. That's what no one's talking about, is the fact that there was a trial. There was a criminal trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. And there were civil lawsuits against Ghislaine Maxwell. And the court and the prosecutors and the lawyers went through redacting information and taking it out and then eventually releasing it, most of it. So I guess the question becomes, well, what did we learn in that case about Jeffrey Epstein and the people he associated with? What was still hidden after all of those cases? Let's ask Jacob Shamsian. He is legal reporter for Insider and covered all of these cases, is still covering the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Jacob, thanks a lot for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Dan, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
All right, so let's start first with what happened in connection with the civil cases and also the criminal trial, about what emerged, what came out about other people that Jeffrey Epstein was involved with who might be in some black book of his.
So that's a great question, Dan. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is there's been a number of civil lawsuits against Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And much of what we know about Epstein comes from a civil lawsuit filed from Virginia Jeffrey, who killed herself a few weeks ago, as some of your listeners might know, against Maxwell over her being trafficked and abused by Epstein. And that case was ultimately settled. But there's been this long unsealing process for a lot of documents that were filed in that case, with depositions, other records about Epstein, Maxwell, who they spent time with. And so, whenever you see until recently, a sort of like a new Epstein files just dropped story out there, that has usually been from part of the unsealing process in that civil case. And what that civil case shows is that, as everyone knows by now, Epstein had all these high-powered connections in the Palm Beach and New York social circles. He had a lot of powerful friends, and also that he abused numerous teenage girls who
right. But people now care less about Epstein, right? And they care more about who were the people around him. And let me read something. The material released, right, in the connection with these cases, they published pilot logs during the prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell, right, which laid out who was on Epstein's plane. They were redacted by prosecutors to protect the identity of certain people, but they also published Epstein's black book, but that black book was victims and not people who he was cavorting with. But talk to us about the redactions and what has been unredacted. So sort of what's still out there, as someone who has followed this case as closely as you have, what is still out there that we don't know?
Yeah, so, as you said, we've had most of the flight logs. We don't have all of them. The Federal Aviation The FAA has some records that they, in my opinion, they should release, and that's one example of like the Epstein files that are still out there. Not huge stuff, but it should be made public, in my opinion. His contact book, as you said, it's out there already. We have that. I think of the material that's still there that the DOJ and also other parts of the administration ought to release are all these underlying documents that the FBI and DOJ obtained when they executed search warrants in Epstein's homes. A lot of that we saw in the Maxwell case, but it was only stuff for the purpose of the Maxwell case, which had a very sort of narrow range of just convicting current sex trafficking charges. But there's all this other stuff that would have perhaps got put into the trial record had Epstein been taken to trial, like other financial records, text communications with people, stuff like that. I do think what you're getting at, Dan, is I think the idea that there were sort of other big, powerful people who were sort of like these girls were trafficked to that were clients of some sort. That stuff is overblown. There's really very little in the public record to support that idea. There are certain friendships with Epstein that I think are a little suspicious, like Prince Andrew, who met Virginia
Right.
Jeffrey, this famous photo of them. That's a real thing. That's something Prince Andrew settled a civil lawsuit with Virginia about that. And there's a few other sort of names out there, but the whole idea that everyone in that black book is guilty of something is really not how any of this works.
But it's also interesting to me that it came out in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial that Trump had actually been on the plane 7 times, right? The Epstein plane.
Yeah, that was he had 3 planes, but yes, he was on the flight logs, and he flew on that several times.
Yeah. And you have to believe that if something's going to be released, right? If there's going to be something that's got big names on it and famous people, it's probably going to be the flight logs, right?
Yeah. And to that point, Dan, why not release the rest of them? Why not sort of just, if Trump is innocent, then just release the rest of it? You know what I mean? I understand why Trump makes
but putting aside innocent, to me, it's that I don't think there's any evidence of wrongdoing by Trump. I think it's just that he doesn't want to be associated with Jeffrey Epstein. And if you're going to release flight logs, you can't release the flight logs without putting Donald Trump on a plane there 7 times.
Yeah, that's right.
And it seems to me that's got to be the explanation, because based on the amount of sudden interest in this, I can't think of any other reason why they would be so reluctant to release this. Because the explanation has changed over time, right? Initially it was, I just need the time to go through it. Then it was, from Pam Bondi, the FBI has withheld documents from me. Okay, now I have the time to go through them. Then in March it was, okay, the FBI is going through them, but they're redacting any information about the victims and they're working 24/7. The minute I heard that, I thought, well, hasn't almost all of this stuff already been redacted in connection with the Ghislaine Maxwell trials?
Well, so, the stuff that was entered into evidence in the Maxwell trial was, redacted names of victims and redacted certain details. I think what I think a lot of people are interested in, to the degree that they even understand what's in there, is all the stuff that wasn't entered into evidence, right? There's an entire universe of stuff that was seized. He had his hard drive seized, computer seized. There's a lot of stuff in there that just wasn't necessarily put into evidence in the Maxwell case.
Right, but there was both the criminal and there were the civil cases, right?
Sure, yeah, and the civil case, got plenty of stuff to the degree that the civil discovery process could get their hands on that stuff. But when the FBI takes your computer and your hard drive, I'm sure everyone can think about all the stuff that's on there, and it's more than just a few thousand pages that we've already seen.
And who had all of this? Meaning, are there civil attorneys who might have additional information, or is this exclusively within the purview of the federal authorities?
So the civil attorneys certainly have a lot. Epstein has been deposed, Ghislaine Maxwell has been deposed, and their depositions are out there already. Those have already come out. But the FBI and the DOJ, to be fair, they do have the bulk of the stuff. Again, like, no civil attorney has seized Jeffrey Epstein's laptops and hard drives from his homes in Manhattan, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Like an FBI search warrant execution, you're going through someone's house, you're taking stuff, you have a search warrant for stuff. That's going to be more exhaustive and more powerful than anything a civil litigator can get, which is this whole sort of different discovery process. Now, certainly there's legal challenges to disclosing that stuff. You know, there's grand jury secrecy issues can be there for some stuff. There's the redaction issues, which supposedly Pam Bondi was going through. But I guess the thing is, weren't they supposed to be spending the past few months doing all that, right? Why put a whole team of FBI people on this, redacting stuff, going through it, and then a few weeks later write a 2-page memo being like, never mind. I think we're good. That's just weird.
Right.
Like, even if you think that, there isn't any big mystery out there, there isn't necessarily some, big crime to be implicated. That just doesn't make any sense. That's just bizarre, in my opinion.
The number is 866-967-6887. It's a unique opportunity to talk to someone who has as much knowledge about the Epstein files as anyone who's talking right now, which is Jacob Shamsian from Business Insider, a legal correspondent there who covered all of the Ghislaine Maxwell trials, and a lot of information came out during those cases. And it seems to me that people, aren't really talking about that. But boy, you listen to what was happening this weekend at this conservative conference, Turning Point USA. Here is Laura Ingraham asking, this is number 8, at whether people are satisfied with the information they've gotten.
How many of you are satisfied? You can clap. Satisfied with the results of the Epstein investigation? Clap. Okay, I told you to clap. You guys aren't listening. I'm not going to grade you on a curve. So I was going to get to that. How many of you are not satisfied with the results of the investigation?
Jacob, even theoretically, right? Like, the fact that we know so much already, right? Without getting into names, right? Theoretically, what could still be out there that would be so interesting or incriminating, apart from just some names, right, of people who he associated with? I don't know. You know this case better than me.
Yeah, so I think, a lot of the CPAC crowd out there is sort of under the, in my opinion, false impression that there's some, intelligence blackmail ring going on, and they want that. But although I just don't think that's really the case. The stuff that I'm interested in, that I do think matters, is material from within the DOJ and the FBI that sort of might help us understand how they failed to pursue Epstein in the first place and for so long. We have that botched 2006 to 2008 investigation in Florida that went really badly, and that ruined the lives of victims because they sort of failed to pursue that properly. There's reports of people calling the FBI and Epstein for the 90s and 80s. And so that matters to me. Also, from this 2019 material, we can maybe get a better understanding of who spent time with Epstein and why after that 2008 guilty plea, where he said, he pled
Hold on one
guilty
second.
to
I want to
an
make sure.
offense.
I want to make sure I understand, because look, the CPAC crowd is not interested in the legal questions about what led to the prosecution. How did it? Because we know a lot of that. But yes, you're right. It would be interesting to know more. That's not what they're interested in.
The big thing, I think, is I think the money. I think we don't have a full understanding of his money. We do know the New York Times just did a great story a few weeks ago about how he reported in a Peter Thiel investment fund, and it's stuff like that, right? Like the financial transactions, I'm sure, are on his computer, which the FBI and DOJ got. So, what's that? What's that about? What is going on there? Can we see a full record of financial transactions? That is really interesting to me.
All right, we're going to take your calls in a minute. This is what former Epstein lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who was accused by Virginia Giuffre back in the day, and who withdrew her allegations against him after he sued her. But he was his lawyer for a while, and this is what Dershowitz said this weekend about it, number 11.
It's true. There is no client list of Jeffrey Epstein's, and the Department of Justice is not not suppressing anything, and I never said they were. There are 2 judges who are suppressing very relevant information, including the names of people who have been accused, and also information about the accusers. And the judges are doing it to protect selectively certain people. And the Justice Department is not at fault here. They have disclosed, as far as I know, everything they have. I, from day one, called for everything to be disclosed, but a couple of judges have refused to do it. Let me tell you what I've seen, so we'll be very clear. I have seen a redacted FBI report, which includes the names of people accused and also accusers. I've seen that. Now, that's redacted. The names have been taken out. We have asked judges to unredact it. They have refused to because they want to protect the people whose names are in there.
Well, it seems to me that they're trying to protect the accusers here. I mean, Alan Dershowitz was accused. That became public, and he sued over it because he said it wasn't true. So it is sort of interesting that it sounds like he's asking for more names of people who may have been accused to be made public. But what do you make of this, Jacob Shamsian?
So, I've spoken to Alan about this, and I wrote a couple of stories about this. Alan's position is that he was falsely accused, and he went to court to get certain files unsealed, including a lot of the ones that we've seen. And his position is that the more we see about them, the more we would understand that the accuser's stories don't really stand up to scrutiny, and the more his name will be cleared. I think people can make up their minds about how that has gone for him, but I do kind of see his points where he's trying to say there's a lot of information out there that is perhaps inconsistent from the accusers. And
right, but that's not what the public are clamoring for.
No, it's not. It's a bit of a
this is the problem. Is there's so much of this sort of bait and switch and sort of changing the subject when it comes to this topic, because we know what they're looking for, right? They want the salation. They want the conspiracy to be proven that somehow Jeffrey Epstein was killed in prison, so he wouldn't be able to name names of famous people, right?
Right. And Dan, look, this is why they should just release everything so we can look for ourselves and see what is there and isn't
well,
there.
the problem isn't the problem with that there would then be people like Alan Dershowitz who are, accused of things, who weren't tried, who weren't indicted, maybe not even sued, right? Where, there are stuff that is potentially, I don't know what the word is, false implications.
So, I think I haven't fully thought this through, but there can be a process for that. So in the civil case, you might remember there was this whole story about a bunch of hundreds of Jane Does or John Does, whose names might be revealed. So that was a process where the court understood there were the names of about 200-ish people whose names just popped up in the documents, not necessarily accused of wrongdoing, sometimes accused of wrongdoing, and they gave these people and their lawyers a certain number of weeks to make an argument to say, hey, this should stay sealed or not stay sealed. And at the end of the day, around 10 of these people asked for sealings, and the judge agreed with some of them, disagreed with some of them, and we got a bunch of documents, and we learned a lot more about what happened.
Yeah.
And, certainly this is a resource-intensive thing, but, if that's what it takes to fulfill Trump's campaign promise of releasing the Epstein files, then that's fine by me. I'm a journalist. I love maximum transparency. I want to see it.
I get it. All right.